What's up, everybody? Welcome to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. Are you getting ready for a big draft tonight or tomorrow? Are you getting ready for week one? Either way, we've got you covered on this special edition of FFT on this Tuesday afternoon. Week one is just 2 days away. I am Adam Azer with Dave Richard and Jamie Eisenberg, and we have the most important draft in the world coming up in 1 hour, our Fantasy Football Today draft. All right, Jamie's got the 11th pick. Dave has the 8th pick. I have the 9th pick. Dave, just let me know now. Who are you going to take 8th overall?
Well, I'm hoping Christian McCaffrey falls to me, Adam. That would be really swell. You know, a name that I'm really going to have to think about is Ja'Marr Chase. And that's the spot where he's been going in, but we don't know if he's going to play in week one. We don't know how soon he's going to show up to actually practice with the Bengals. It actually makes me nervous to take him in that spot. So I might end up with A.J. Brown at 8th overall, Adam.
Okay. By the way, you're totally stealing from big topic number one, but that's okay. We'll get to that in a moment. If you don't take Ja'Marr Chase at 8th overall, I will probably take him 9th overall. Jamie, what are you going to do with the 11th pick and then the 14th pick?
You're kind of just in that waiting game of who's available to you, and that's usually like a Saquon Barkley, Jonathan Taylor spot. Could be Puka Nacua, Marvin Harrison. I'm drafting ahead of Will Brinson, who is a very wild card in this draft because he could do some crazy things. So I gotta sort of prepare myself the right way for two players going after me that I didn't expect. But that's two receivers in Harrison Jr. and Puka, and then two running backs in Taylor and Barkley.
All right, well, I can't wait to get that started. And Dave, without any further ado, let's get to big topic number one.
Oh, I can't wait to hear what it is.
Yeah, Christian McCaffrey is now 8th in average draft position. Now, Ja'Marr Chase, we don't know if he's going to play week one. So how are you guys feeling about him? If you were drafting tonight, just generally speaking, how are you feeling about Ja'Marr Chase heading into the season, Dave?
I'm nervous, obviously. I'm thinking about taking A.J. Brown ahead of him, and that was something I was never, ever, ever doing throughout the entire preseason training camp, off-season process. I figured that the Bengals would be like the 49ers and the Cowboys. They'd get this thing taken care of. And since it hasn't been taken care of yet, and because Ja'Marr Chase still has 2 years left on his deal, and because we've seen him sit out of an entire college football season before, I'm a little nervous. Is it enough to say, all right, I'm just going to go and take A.J. Brown, or do I roll the dice? Because let's face it, Jamie, and you know this, Ja'Marr Chase has the upside to be the number one receiver in fantasy, and I don't think A.J. Brown does. So if I take Brown over Chase, I'm basically admitting that I'm nervous about Ja'Marr Chase and that I'm not taking a wide receiver that can finish 1 overall.
Yeah, I would still take Chase over Brown. Exactly what you said. There's just a little bit more upside with him, and they both share the field with great receivers, great options. They both have great quarterbacks, but what we've seen from Ja'Marr Chase, when Joe Burrow's on the field. Last season, 9 games together, over 20 PPR points per game. The year before, Chase missed 4 games, but over 20 PPR points per game when Burrow's on the field. So when those two guys are together, you know what you're getting, which is elite level production, and I don't want to miss that. And so while there may be a lull in week one if he doesn't play, or if he does play, you got to be a little concerned about what his snap count will be because he hasn't worked up to speed yet. But I still want that upside, so I'm going to take Chase just over Brown. But obviously Chase has fallen. For me, he was as high as wide receiver 3. When we had the Jefferson quarterback concerns, when we had, CeeDee Lamb dealing with his holdout, he's fallen. He's fallen behind Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's fallen behind the 2 other running backs, not named McCaffrey, in terms of Bijan Robinson and Breece Hall. So he's definitely dropped in this process, but I would still take him over A.J. Brown.
Yeah, I looked at NFC average draft position, kind of high stakes leagues, just over the last 4 or 5 days to see where he was going. It's 177 drafts, and Ja'Marr Chase is still top 8 pick, but he's wide receiver 4. He's behind Justin Jefferson there. He's still ahead of A.J. Brown. All right, second big topic here. It has been a long draft process, long preseason, long but fun. But who's one player that you are more optimistic about now? A guy that you've gotten more optimistic about throughout this offseason, let's call it pre-draft and draft process, Jamie?
Yeah, Ken Walker. Not that I was down on him, but, you have Zach Charbonnet dealing with some injury. We don't know exactly what he's, been missing training camp and practice time with. And then you just hear all the positive buzz from the Seattle coaches, and so we have a new system there with Ryan Grubb. We've talked about this a lot in our podcast. They're going to be on the field more, running more plays, hopefully a little bit more up-tempo. And the biggest thing is, will he be more involved in the passing game? And that's got to get you excited, because that's been the thing that's kind of missing from his career through the first 2 years of his career. So if he can get to maybe in the 40 catch range, I'll be a little bit more cautious and say 30 plus catches, because that's just been something that's escaped his profile right now. He's got double-digit touchdown potential. And listen, if Charbonnet is going to miss any time, he could be among the league leaders in rushing yards. He's got that much upside. So a borderline round 2 pick, I just love the upside for Walker this year.
I've been drafting a ton of him. I like that call a lot. I want to go further back than the preseason, though, Adam. Draft night, I was nervous about Malik Neighbors going to the Giants. And ever since then, I've slowly moved him up and up and up my rankings. We even talked about him in this studio maybe a month ago and comparing him to what DJ Moore did last year, and the light bulb went off on my head. And off to the races I went, Adam. I love Malik Neighbors as a round 3 pick in PPR redraft leagues right now, and I've seen him fall to round 4. I've seen him fall to round 5. I know I'm drafting him very close to his ceiling in round 3, but I think he's got a lot of potential to get a ton of targets in New York.
Are you drafting him ahead of DJ Moore?
Yes.
Okay. My guy is George Pickens. There was, obviously a lot of consternation with the Brandon Ayuk rumors. Those are done as Ayuk sign an extension with the 49ers. And Pickens is still wide receiver 27 or so in ADP. I mean, he's still like at the 5-6 turn on different websites. It's crazy to me. Without Deontay Johnson last year, 4 games, he had 127 yards, 75 yards, 25 yards, and 130 yards. He had 2 touchdowns in those 4 games. Faced Cleveland and Baltimore. He was terrific. He had a 29% target share. George Pickens is so clearly the best option on the Steelers. I think he's obviously gonna have a career year. I think we all feel that way. But I think he's gonna play like a 3rd rounder, and he's a guy you can get maybe in the 5th round, in some cases the 6th round. All right, number 3 in our big topics. One player that you have gotten more pessimistic about throughout the draft process. Jamie, I'll throw it to you again.
Yeah, it's Derrick Henry, and he gives me constipation trying to think about drafting him just because of the potential pitfalls of what he can be. When you look at his age, 30 obviously is not the number that you like to see. Father Time is undefeated, and it's going to chase him down at some point. But really, it's the offensive line. Replacing 3 offensive linemen from last year, and the cost obviously is just way too high. On CBS Sports, his average draft position is 15th overall. There's no chance I would take him in the early part of the 2nd round. I've drafted him once. It was in the middle of round 3. I'm fine with him there. But to take him in round 2 is a huge mistake, and there's so many other running backs that should be going ahead of him. Josh Jacobs, James Cook, Isiah Pacheco, Travis Etienne. And you could even make a case at this point, Rachaad White, that's a move I made. Ken Walker, somebody I would draft over him as well. I just think there's too many ways for Henry to fail. We're asking him to score 15-plus touchdowns. That is realistic, but it's also a huge number. He's not going to catch passes. 33 is a career high. This isn't an offense that's going to throw to his running backs at a high level, and I just don't think we're going to see the best of Derrick Henry this year. I think he's going to be good, not great. Don't reach for him in round 2.
I don't know if we're going to see the best of Kyle Pitts ever. It's been 3 years. He's been really disappointing. Injuries have played a role, there's no question, and quarterback play certainly. But there's been nothing that I've seen, and I literally watched him practice for 2 days, that has made me get excited about Kyle Pitts.
You should probably talk to Mike Tomlin, because he's been raving about him all day.
He's going to rave about everybody on the Falcons. That's his job as head coach. He's not going to say bad things about him and give him bulletin board material. But the bottom line is this. There's a report that came out today that said that Kyle Pitts has really been focusing on short area targets. That might make him okay in PPR, and he's still a top 10 tight end for me in PPR. But I can't get behind drafting him in that round 5, round 6 range. I literally have him on 0 of my teams. So if I'm wrong on this, I'm going to pay for it in my fantasy leagues. But I think Drake London's going to be the number 1 guy in Atlanta. And I'm not even sure if Pitts is going to be the number 2 guy there. I'm very nervous about his usage, how effective he'll be, and how explosive he'll be in that Falcons offense.
All right, yeah, for me, it's Travis Kelce. He started as tight end 1 now. He's probably tight end 2 for me, but I just don't draft him because I'm getting a little nervous about Rashee Rice and his role. Xavier Worthy looking really good. Marquise Brown should be back. Kelce, my argument has always been he was tied as tight end 1 last year per game with 5 touchdowns. 5 touchdowns. He could easily get 10 this year. And he should still be good, but I'm less excited about him. I don't think he's going to be a standout from the rest of the pack.
Average draft position in round 2 is just ridiculous.
Agreed.
And he's going 13 spots ahead of Sam Laporta on our site, which is just crazy.
I've got Laporta ranked ahead of Kelce. Do you?
Yeah.
Yeah, Jamie, by the way, I got this for you. I had my wife bring in some prunes. If I'll send them your way for your Derrick Henry.
Only when Derrick Henry's on the clock. That's the only time I need it.
All right. Can Jonathan Brooks or Nick Chubb, as people make these decisions about their teams, are they going to put these guys in an IR spot? Can Jonathan Brooks or Nick Chubb be league winners, Dave Richard?
I think they absolutely can. We just don't know what version of Jonathan Brooks and Nick Chubb we're going to get and when we're going to get him. The Panthers have already said they're going to take their time with Jonathan Brooks. He might sit out more than the 4 games that he has to sit out before he's back on the field. And when he's back on the field, it could be a couple of weeks of him getting 10 touches a game, 12 touches a game. He might not ramp up and be someone that fantasy managers will feel comfortable starting until December. But that being said, that's when fantasy championships start to be won. And if you can just stash him in your IR spot, he does have that upside. I like his long-term potential more so than Nick Chubb, who's coming off of a very, very serious knee injury. And we know that he's almost 30 years old. There's going to be some struggles in his rehab. And we've heard from the Browns, they want to be more of a passing team. I don't know if I believe that. And I think if Nick Chubb comes back and he's exactly the guy he used to be, that probably won't happen. But I'm not sure if we should count on that with Nick Chubb. And he might not come back and play on the field until October, late October. And then he could still be sharing well into December.
The question really is how did you build your fantasy team, or how are you planning to draft these guys? Because if you're reaching for them to be starters right away with the idea of, okay, I'm just going to be patient and draft their replacements after them, then that's probably a mistake. If you're getting them as your 3rd running back, in the case of Chubb, probably your 4th running back, and just understanding, like, these are stash candidates for me that are eventually going to become hopeful league winners, but potential starters, that's the right way to draft your team. So I'll just give you an example. Non-PPR league, I share the team with my 6-year-old son. We're talking about a lot of picks. We just drafted Jonathan Brooks as our 4th running back. So again, PPR would probably be our 3rd running back, but non-PPR it's our 4th running back. We have no need to play him at all. We're never going to put him on the field until he's ready to go and proves that he's the guy that the Panthers drafted and fantasy managers are hoping to see. I would do the same thing with Nick Chubb. Just as long as you have either a replacement option in place, whether it's Jerome Ford, Chuba Hubbard, we know that either one can mix and match with either running back because they're both going to get the starter's opportunity. But just don't draft them with the idea of, this will be my starter in 4 or 5 weeks. I'll just manage it until then. Let them be a guy that just sits on your bench or obviously your IR spot, and then eventually they can be a starter for your team.
Okay, thanks for making me feel bad about not having my 6-year-old play fantasy football, Jamie. I thought maybe it was a little bit too young, but I guess not.
Next year, we'll find a spot for Andy.
They start him young in the Eisenberg house.
Yeah, he thinks the wide receiver's name is Lamb CD because he saw it that way on my roster. So I have a lot to teach him.
He was pissed that we did not get Patrick Mahomes in the 1st round. But he wanted Jalen Hurts in round 2, and then we got Isiah Pacheco in round 3. So he was very happy about that.
Oh, perfect. All right. Listen, we got some last-minute draft prep, sleepers, breakouts, and busts if you're still getting ready. I know that the 3 of us, we have at least 1 draft today. I have 3, so still plenty of drafts going on. Sleepers, breakouts, busts when we come back on Fantasy Football Today. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. Adam, Dave, and Jamie here. All right, time for sleepers, breakouts, and busts. And look, we're going to get you ready for drafts. If you've already drafted, pay attention to the sleepers because these are guys who could be on waivers in some of your leagues. And breakouts for some trade ideas, busts obviously for the same here. So Jamie's 3 sleepers, Jaleel McLaughlin, Ty Chandler, and Khalil Shakir. We can start right there, Jamie. Jaleel McLaughlin, Ty Chandler, and Khalil Shakir. Let's say need wasn't a concern right now. How would you rank those 3?
Jaleel McLaughlin, Khalil Shakir, Ty Chandler. I just think for McLaughlin, we've seen Sean Payton throughout his history use 2 running backs, and he reminds me a little bit of Darren Sproles just based on his size, but he's so explosive. Last year of running backs with 50 or more carries, he was 2nd behind Devon Achane. So he's got the opportunity to be a home run hitter. He had 3 games last year with 10 touches or more. In those 3 games, he averaged 16 PPR points. So there's big play potential. And Javonte Williams is going to be the lead guy, but our colleague Heath Cummings has talked about this a lot. There's almost 600 touches available in this backfield for these guys. And you look at Bo Nix and how he's going to operate and just how this offense, I think, is going to dink and dunk its way down the field with not a lot of talented receivers, based on Josh Reynolds is banged up right now. Troy Franklin hasn't really established himself. Same with Marvin Mims. So behind Sutton, it's just kind of an empty, palette. it's just a clear slate right now for these guys to step up in the passing game from the running back position. So I think McLaughlin's going to be a guy that could be a borderline flex in almost every league. Maybe not 10-team leagues, but 12-team leagues or larger. And if something happens to Javonte Williams, while he won't be the lead back, he certainly will have an even bigger role. So for me, he's a must draft when he's available, and certainly a must add because he's available in about half of our leagues right now.
Dave, do you like Khalil Shakir or Keon Coleman?
I've got Shakir ranked just ahead of Coleman. I think he's going to end up being the most reliable wide receiver for Josh Allen in Buffalo. Maybe not the guy that leads them in targets. I think Dalton Kincaid can be that guy, but Shakir's going to line up in the slot a lot. And the track record of Josh Allen leaning on his slot receivers, and this goes back to the days of Isiah McKenzie. For those who've been paying attention to me for a long time, you know how much I liked Isiah McKenzie a few years ago. It didn't quite work out for fantasy, but it still held true. Josh Allen does favor his slot receivers, and so that's why I think Khalil Shakir is in line for over 100 targets this year. Ignore this projection or extrapolate the projection and see that he could get close to 900 yards and maybe 6 or 7 touchdowns. Not bad for a guy that you can get after round 8.
So the only thing that I'll disagree with is that if you're looking for the most upside of the Bills receivers, it's Keon Coleman. If you're looking for the safest of the Bills receivers, I think Dave's right, it's Khalil Shakir. But if Coleman hits, he could be an absolute megastar because he's going to be on the field a lot. We know Josh Allen loves to have a big play threat. And so Shakir, I don't think profiles as that guy. If Coleman can become the receiver I think that they're hoping he can, then he could be a huge difference maker for fantasy. So I'll take Coleman over Shakir, but obviously I love Shakir as well.
Couldn't you draft both?
Yep.
Draft both, hope that one hits big.
You could draft all three.
You
could draft Curtis Samuel also, and then just sort of, drop the one that's not doing anything after a couple weeks.
Just get them all. Get Lee Evans on there. Go get Andre Reed. Let's just load up on Bills receivers.
Oh man! All right, Dave. Khalil Shakir versus Josh Palmer is always an annoying conundrum for me. I never know which way to go. I like both those guys. Palmer's one of your sleepers. Rico Dowdle and Zach Ertz.
So with Palmer, I think he's just got a much better path to being number one in terms of targets on the Chargers. He's the only guy in LA, and so is Shakir in Buffalo, by the way, who has a track record with their current quarterback. You look at the rest of the Chargers wide receivers, it's Ladd McConkey, it's DJ Chark is there, Quentin Johnson is still there. Yeah, Johnson's got some experience with Justin Herbert, but Palmer's got multiple years of experience with him. And he's had 16 games in his career with Justin Herbert where he's had at least 7 targets, at least 13 PPR points in 10 of those games. I think, what were you just doing, Adam? Were you like having a prune just then? You were kind of like off to the side. What were you doing? What was that?
Nothing.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, listen, bottom line is that I think Josh Palmer can actually outproduce Khalil Shakir. So when I'm faced with either of those guys, Palmer's the one I draft first.
I think it's sort of fascinating how, for most people, we started the offseason process, especially after the draft. Like McConkey could be that guy because does he profile as the Keenan Allen replacement? There's 300 targets they have to replace, and I know it's not going to be as pass happy as they have been under Brandon Staley with Jim Harbaugh there and Greg Roman, but that's still a lot of vacated targets. And like Dave said, Palmer's the one that's been there the most. So this should be a huge year for him. Hopefully he steps forward and assumes that mantle of being the go-to guy for Palmer, for Herbert. It wouldn't surprise me though by the end of the season McConkey's outproducing him, but still both those guys, again similar to the Bills guys, you could draft both.
Now I feel like I want to make a face every time there's a full screen up, just to surprise Dave. Let's go to Dave's breakouts here. He's got Garrett Wilson, Isiah Pacheco, and Dalton Kincaid. Garrett Wilson, Isiah Pacheco, Dalton Kincaid for your breakouts.
Well, Simon Eisenberg is a big fan of Pacheco, so I join in his excitement for him. And I know that there's a lot being made of Samaje Perine joining the Kansas City Chiefs. And there's Carson Steele, who was a preseason darling. And what does that mean for Pacheco? And honestly, I'm kind of blowing it off. I really don't think that Perine is going to take a ton of work away from Pacheco. Will he work third and long? Yeah, he probably will, because Pacheco still isn't totally established as a passing threat in that Kansas City offense. Plus, Kansas City is going to want to try and monitor his reps a little bit. That's where Steele could possibly come into play as well. But Pacheco is very well decorated in that offense. And when he's gotten the work, and this goes back to last year, about 2/3 of the time he's come through with monster fantasy numbers. And in the playoffs last year, you know this, Adam, you know this is for the viewers, he almost dominated third down snaps in the red zone. Those are the third down snaps that I care about the most. I think Pacheco will get that. When I see him in round 2, I don't hesitate to take him.
All right, Jamie's breakouts. We heard about a couple of these guys on our opening segment. Ken Walker, someone that Jamie's gotten more optimistic about. George Pickens is someone I talked about. I'm getting more optimistic about. Actually, I think I've pretty maxed out my optimism. They can get much higher on Pickens. So how about Christian Watson? He's the other guy on your list, Jamie. What do you think? And I'm kind of feeling him for week 1 against the Eagles. But what do you think about Watson?
Yeah, very excited. Just got to stay healthy. When you look at this Packers receiving core, there's 4 guys, and I think they're all going to be involved. But one guy is a difference maker if he hits, and it's Christian Watson. Jayden Reed was good last year, but you got to take away, I think, the rushing production because that's hard to expect 2 rushing touchdowns for a wide receiver that's not going to play on every snap. Romeo Doubs, 8 touchdowns. Clearly, is going to be a factor for Jordan Love. And then Dontavian Wicks is kind of the replacement option for all these guys. So if somebody misses time like Watson did last year, then Wicks comes into play a little bit more. But Watson, as we've seen, whether it was Aaron Rodgers in his rookie campaign or last year with Jordan Love, the 2 games before he was lost for the rest of the regular season, over 20 PPR points in both of those outings. He's a huge, big play threat down the field, similar to George Pickens. Third-year receiver, could absolutely break out this year. They've hopefully figured out this hamstring problem by getting him to a specialist. So if he can play 13-plus games, let's just say, he could absolutely be a top 20 wide receiver. He's got that much upside. So Jordan Love, as we saw, coming into his own, we really didn't see the full potential when Jordan Love was taking off with Christian Watson. It was sort of at the beginning of that, which helped Jordan Love take off in those 2 games. I just love the upside of what Watson can bring. He's cheaper than almost every third-year wide receiver, so you can get him close to round 8, maybe round 7. That's usually where I try to target him just because I like to get him on my team. But if he hits, he's going to obliterate Reed, obliterate Dobbs, obliterate Wicks, and going to be a huge threat for Jordan Love.
All right, let's talk about some busts now. We'll go to Dave's bust. Kyle Pitts, you talked about him in our opening segment. Michael Pittman and Rhamondre Stevenson. All right, who do you want to highlight here with Pitts, Pittman, and Stevenson?
I haven't really talked a lot about Rhamondre Stevenson this preseason, and I know that fantasy managers are going to gravitate toward him as a settle for RB2, and I get that. I think that that's okay. But I just don't like the offense in New England. It's nothing against him. I think Rhamondre Stevenson is a solid running back. But I worry a little bit about that offensive line and whether or not it's really improved. Their quarterback situation, I think teams are going to try and dare the New England Patriots to throw on them. I don't know if they've got any explosive wide receivers that can take the top off and make things easier for Rhamondre Stevenson. And one of the things that we really loved and gravitated toward with Rhamondre Stevenson last year were the catches that he had. Well, they added Antonio Gibson. I think Gibson will take some of that work away from Rhamondre, not all of it, and he's still a candidate for somewhere between 35 and 45 catches over the balance of the season. But last year, Adam, I think I told you this, 1 carry for more than 20 yards from Rhamondre Stevenson, and he's almost never done well against his AFC East rivals. I am nervous about him hitting an upside of even 13.5 PPR points per game. If you draft him with the idea that he'll be around 12 PPR points per game, I think you won't be unhappy.
All right, so you got Pittman on here. Would you rather have Pittman or Pickens?
I'd rather have Pickens.
Jamie?
Oh, definitely Pickens. Yeah, I mean, Pittman is I think, similar to what Dave said about, Rhamondre. He's more of a settle for, type of receiver at this point. He's going to lose targets to Josh Downs when he's back, and Adonai Mitchell is going to be a huge factor. And look, we're not going to expect a lot of touchdowns from Pittman with Anthony Richardson there and Jonathan Taylor healthy. He didn't score a lot of touchdowns last year when he was uber targeted by Gardner Minshew. So in PPR, could he still be a number 2 wide receiver for you? Absolutely. But I think you'd rather have him as a number 3 receiver. So catches and yards, hopefully still okay. Touchdowns concern me immensely, and I just don't think he's somebody that should go even in the first 4 rounds. For me, he's a round 5 pick.
And we'll finish off with Jamie's bust, Derrick Henry, Davante Adams, and Travis Kelce.
I mean, we talked about Henry, we talked about Kelce. For Adams, his ADP is actually settled to a decent spot on our site in the round 3 range. He's just not somebody that I've been drafting a lot. And I'm really concerned about all these wide receivers that are age 31 years or older. You look at Cooper Kupp, you look at Mike Evans, you look at Adams, take it a little step further with Keenan Allen and DeAndre Hopkins. I said this a lot. 63 wide receivers in the last 10 years have played 10-plus games, and only 8 have been in the top 12 in PPR scoring. Only 15 have been in the top 25 of PPR scoring. So the odds are against these guys of all being successful, and all of them are being drafted in the top 20 wide receivers. So someone's going to fail, and we saw from Adams last year, he went from 19 PPR points per game in 2022, 15 PPR points per game last year. You can blame Jimmy Garoppolo, that's fine. Aiden O'Connell did a good job in getting Adams the ball at the end of the season, and I think Minshew will certainly target him. But he's been 175-plus targets in 2 straight years. If he comes down to the 140 or 150 range, which is realistic in this offense, with the addition of Brock Bowers, it could be a disaster for Adams based on how his efficiency looked last year. So he's just not somebody that I take, even though I think round 3, the price tag isn't horrible.
All right, fair. Listen, coming up on the show, we're going to talk about week 1, some of the tough calls. But up next, it is buy or sell. We reached out to you on Twitter or X. Got your buy or sells? We'll read them when we come back on Fantasy Football Today. We are back here on Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. It is time now for some buy or sell. You should follow us on Twitter. You can get on the show. We'll be asking for your help with some content all throughout the season on Twitter. I am at Adam Azer, at Jamie Eisenberg, at Dave Richard, right? That's what it is?
It's either that or at Mr. Hot Muscles. One of the two. Just depends on which job I'm doing.
All right, let's go to our first buy or sell. This one I think is insane. What's with you Jets fans? Buy or sell that the Bears' big three will score more fantasy points than the Texans' big three by the end of the season? I'm selling. I don't even know what the rationale for buying that would be, Dave and Jamie, Mr. Hot Muscles.
I think the rationale is that C.J. Stroud takes a humongous step back, and Stephon Diggs also takes a humongous step back, whereas the Bears have a lot of youth on their side in the case of Caleb Williams, Rome Odunze, DJ Moore, Keenan. All right, maybe not all of them are youthful, but Keenan Allen can still participate in there. That being said, I actually think C.J. Stroud takes a step forward. I don't think Stephon Diggs is done by a long shot. I think Tank Dell could be amazing for the Texans. And despite all that, I still have Nico Collins ranked highest of the three wide receivers in Houston. I'm taking the Texans' big three.
I would venture to guess the Texans' receiving core is probably younger than the Bears' receiving core. Even though Odunze
all the way around,
is a rookie,
yeah,
because Keenan Allen's so old.
Keenan Allen closer to.
I thought though, just to piggyback off that, I thought the Bears just have a big one, not a big three. You get the joke.
I already get the joke.
Yeah. All right, we're selling this one here. Let's go to our next buy or sell from the baseball guy, 13. Buy or sell. It's football season, dude. Chase Brown and Blake Corum being RB1s by midseason.
Oh, I could buy that. I mean, look, Chase Brown clearly is in a timeshare where he might be the best running back already in Cincinnati. And Blake Corum's in a spot where, Kyron Williams missed 4 games last year. The punt returner, but, not an established track record aside from what he did last season where he was amazing. But, Corum could come in and maybe steal the job. But if Williams misses any time, he could Wally Pipp him and be the starter for the rest of the season. So, yeah, I could buy this 100%.
I think Brown is already being bought by the Bengals as being their number one running back. There's all kinds of steam coming out of Cincinnati that Chase Brown is the guy that they prefer. And I wouldn't be surprised if Chase Brown actually led them in touches in week 1 against New England. It's an interesting matchup, by the way, because the Patriots defense might not be at full strength. In fact, they definitely won't be at full strength against the run. But how that breakdown will be between Brown and Moss, I actually think it'll benefit Brown. I think you go with the younger running back there. And I love Corum's style of rushing as well. If Kyron Williams, forget about Kyron Williams missing time. We've seen this coaching staff in LA just completely quit on their running backs before and get them off the roster or put them in the doghouse and they go to the next guy. And if Kyron Williams gets off to a slow start this year, Blake Corum will be right in there and it'll be a short leash for Kyron Williams.
Okay, so we'll just say this one has some legs. We could see it happening. This next one here is about Jackson Smith-Njigba versus DK Metcalf in week 1 against the Denver Broncos. I so badly want to buy this one, but Tyler Lockett making some progress as well. That complicates things if he plays. But buy or sell, JSN has a better week than DK Metcalf in week 1 against Denver.
I'm going to sell this, and I would imagine most fantasy managers are hoping this isn't the case because clearly DK Metcalf was drafted to be a starter, whereas JSN was drafted to be on your bench to see what happens with him throughout the course of the season. So if you were counting on JSN to be a starter, then clearly this would be a little bit of a tougher call. But if I have DK Metcalf, I know the matchup is tough. I really have to have a loaded receiving core to consider sitting him. Yes, the matchup's going to be tough against Surtain. Hopefully this new coaching staff will be creative, moving him around. We'll see if Surtain follows him. But I'm not sitting Metcalf. I just downgrade some of the expectations because of that matchup against Surtain potentially looming out there. I do think, though, JSN could have a fantastic season, but no way would I start him over week 1. No way would I expect him to do better than him going into week 1.
Agree on all fronts. I think we will see Metcalf move into the slot a little bit more than we have in the past. It just makes sense for them to do that, and it's something that Ryan Grubb has done both at Washington and Fresno State, utilizing those wide receivers. JSN will be in the slot the most, and slot receivers have really done well in this scheme, but I think DK Metcalf is the safer bet for week 1.
All right, this one is about Rico Dowdle, one of Dave's sleepers from an earlier segment. Buy or sell that Rico Dowdle is the best Cowboys running back and finishes in the top 15.
Easy to buy the first half of that. The second half of that, I might have a little bit of a hard time buying. So if we can amend it to, I'll be a little bit more bullish and say top 20, I would buy that. I think that there is an opportunity for him to beat the competition of a slower Ezekiel Elliott, a slower Dalvin Cook. Cowboys really did not make any major moves this offseason to improve their run game. That should tell you something about how they feel about Rico Dowdle. In fact, they're taking him off of special teams so that he can focus more on being their lead running back. And you know this better than anybody. We've been chasing the Cowboys running backs for years and years. We'd love to have the guy that goes off. I think Dowdle could be the guy.
I totally agree. Yeah, it's going to be fun to see how he performs. The question is will they still use Zeke at the goal line? Will they use, whether it's him, Deuce Vaughn, eventually Dalvin Cook more in the passing game? So this is going to be a different Cowboys backfield than we've seen really since Ezekiel Elliott took over, where they're going to use multiple guys. But hopefully Dowdle does enough to sort of say, okay, I'm the lead guy, and I could potentially push to be in the top 15. I wouldn't buy that either, but I do think he will be the best Cowboys running back.
Best part about it, Adam, he's so cheap on draft day. No one's making the move for Rico Dowdle in round 7 or round 8. It's after that, and it's great value. So if we're wrong and Rico Dowdle stinks, it's going to cost you a round 9 pick. Not a big deal.
I'm trying to remember the name of the Cowboys running back that I was super high on.
Joseph Randle.
Joseph Randle. There it is. That's exact. Thank you, Dave. Way to go. All right, couple more.
Why don't you celebrate that with a prune, Adam?
Buy or sell. James Cook finishes top 12 in week 1 against a bad Cardinals defense.
Well, I'll buy this all day. I mean, if he scores a touchdown, it's almost guaranteed because that's what happened to him last year. He scored 6 touchdowns almost every time he found the end zone. He was a borderline superstar. And so, yes, with the Bills trying to figure out their offense, still, I think, a work in progress because of all the changes with the receivers. I think Cook's going to get plenty of touches and easily can do that against this team.
Let me tell you something. If he doesn't do it in week 1, there's a problem. Like, what's going on? What happened? Why didn't he finish?
Well, I mean, if he's top
back?
15, you're not going to complain. If he's top 20 because he didn't score and the total yards were there, I think you're fine.
I want to see 15-plus touches. I want to see at least 4 of those touches come through the air. Of course, I want to see a touchdown. I want to see 100 total yards from this guy. But if he doesn't finish top 12 against this Cardinals defense, I don't think they're going to be very good. I've got some questions about what's going on in Buffalo.
The real concern will be is if Ray Davis is getting like every goal line opportunity. That would be the scary part.
Exactly. All right, one more. Dan99 Jets Giants Fantasy. God, that just feels like a Schneier Twitter handle. Buy or sell. Achane and Gibbs will both be the second highest scoring running back on their teams.
So basically what we're saying is Raheem Mostert and David Montgomery are better than them. That would be a little frustrating for anybody who drafted these guys. More so I think Gibbs than Achane because Gibbs is a borderline first-round pick. But it would be great for the value of the other two guys. I have a hard time, with that barring injury because I think Gibbs showed us last year. He was fantastic. He still scored 10 touchdowns in an offense that we know has been very good in the last 2 seasons of producing running back scores. He's going to dominate in the passing game by comparison to Montgomery. Achane last year, was amazing. His metrics were off the charts, but we still saw Raheem Mostert, 21 total touchdowns, 18 rushing touchdowns, led the NFL. So that one I could see happening just because if Mostert stays healthy, the touchdown potential probably in his favor. But if Gibbs is not better than David Montgomery, we really whiffed on where we ranked him and certainly where he was drafted.
And the same thing with Achane with Mostert, where if Mostert is better than Achane this year, then we're whiffing all over the place on both of these backfields. I would buy into the younger guys.
With the hamstring injury, did you give any thought to ranking Montgomery ahead of Gibbs this week?
No. I think the fact that he was already starting to practice is, showing that he's good to go. I love everything Detroit this week. I think they're going to absolutely destroy the Rams at home. It's the highest total of the week, 51.5 points right now. So we should expect, anytime the Lions are at home, big production from almost all the superstars, and that should be the case with Gibbs.
Is there anybody from that game that you wouldn't start?
Jameson is clearly the one that does he work into, he's not going to be a starter in 2 receiver leagues. Is he a starter in 3 receiver leagues in the flex? Then he's in that conversation.
Absolutely, I agree.
All right, well, we will talk about week 1 in just a little bit. We've got tough calls in week 1. Brock Purdy against the Jets. Can you trust Jayden Daniels, his first career start against Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the road? We'll talk about that when we come back on Fantasy Football Today. We're back on Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. And we are finally previewing games, regular season games. We are into our week 1 prep. By the way, our podcast, super detailed start or sit advice if you ever need it. And we'll have it right here on Friday as well on CBS Sports Network. All right, tough calls for week 1. You guys tell me start or sit. Give me maybe a minute on each combined. Brock Purdy against the Jets.
Nervous about how well he'll perform with Brandon Ayuk barely practicing and with Trent Williams coming back, but also barely practicing. And it's the Jets, for crying out loud. That's a tough defense. I've got him outside of my top 12.
He's barely in my top 15. Well, you see outside my top 15, 17th overall, 17th at the quarterback position. No, I would not start him. I would only start him in 2 quarterback and super flex leagues. I think it's going to be a low production type of game for Brock Purdy.
Jets allowed the second fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks last season. Jayden Daniels is at Tampa Bay. Obviously a much better matchup here. But it's tough to trust a rookie in his first career start. What do you think about Jayden Daniels? Remember, we were sitting Anthony Richardson in his first start, and he was really good. But what about Jayden Daniels? What do you guys think?
So if he was drafted to be your starter and you don't have a backup that you like better, for example, if you drafted Jayden Daniels and Jared Goff, I would start Goff over Daniels. I would start Tua over Daniels. I would even start Trevor Lawrence over Daniels, like the matchup for him a little bit more. But I have Daniels in a few leagues where I didn't draft a backup, so I'm not going to make a move. So I think he'll be okay. I just don't think there's a high ceiling here for him in his first game. I do think Tampa Bay's defense is going to be a little bit tough, certainly up the middle. The pressure from Vita Vea and company is going to be in his face. So I'd like to see Jayden Daniels perform before I say must-start quarterback. But clearly, again, if he's your only guy on your roster, don't make a move to go replace him.
A lot of upside to leave on the bench, though, in week 1. He's not in my top 12 either, but I would start him ahead of Brock Purdy as an example. And I worry about that offensive line for Washington holding up against Tampa. You mentioned it, that big front. So Jayden Daniels' first NFL game, he's going to be scrambling a lot. That works both ways. He can get a lot of rushing yards, but he can also turn the ball over if he's not too careful.
We'll keep an eye on Yaya Diaby for the Bucs. He did return to practice. He was their best pass rusher last season and a second-year guy that we're looking at. I'm going to skip Jared Goff because I know Jamie loves him. It's set up really nicely for him. He scored 20 or more fantasy points in 6 of 8 home games last year. The Rams could be a little vulnerable defensively. So let's go to some running backs here. You got the Titans running backs against the Bears. The Bears, I think they were 3rd best in yards per carry allowed to running backs last season. Titans, we don't exactly know what's going to happen, Jamie. Are you starting either Pollard or Spears?
So, again, if you drafted Pollard to be a starter for you and you don't have somebody better on your bench, why would you go consider replacing him at this point? Spears is a little bit different. He was definitely drafted to be a reserve, at best a flex option. Maybe if you went hero RB or 0 RB, he is going to be your RB2. But I would like to see how this backfield split plays itself out. Pollard looked a little bit more explosive in the preseason. Both guys got goal line carries, so we could see them, sort of mixing and matching as we've heard throughout the course of this process since Pollard signed in Tennessee. But Pollard would be a low-end number 2 running back for me. He's just outside that range, but again, I wouldn't look to replace him. And Spears, I would rather take just a little bit more of a cautious approach and keep him on the bench.
Yeah, definitely want to try and keep these guys on your bench if you can help it. Some names that I do have ranked ahead of them: Brian Robinson with Washington, Chase Brown for the Bengals. I don't know why I took forever to say that. And even Rhamondre Stevenson, who I'm not a big fan of and I don't love his matchup, I'd take him over both Titans running backs.
I think the question would be like for Tony Pollard, right? Let's say he was drafted as a high-end RB3, but you got 2 starters, you got Pollard, and now you're deciding on your flex in a 2-receiver league, and it's Chris Godwin, or it's Christian Kirk, or it's Christian Watson, or someone whose name isn't Chris or Christian or something like that, against Tony Pollard. Where are you leaning there?
I'm leaning with the wide receivers in every single case. Really don't want to start a Titans running back unless I have to.
Agree.
Dave, the Chase Brown is on the Bengals. I think we just established. How do you feel about them against the Patriots?
I'm nervous about just what that workload will look like, but I think both Brown and Moss have potential to see north of 13 touches each in the game. That's a lot for 2 running backs to have on the same team. But I think Cincinnati's going to stomp the Patriots. Their offense is in bad shape. They're missing one of their best defensive tackles in Christian Barmore. They've obviously made a trade getting rid of Matt Judon. So I don't know how good that run defense really is. And I think the Bengals, even with their offensive line issues, can attack that. And especially if Jamar Chase either doesn't play or suits up after barely practicing this week, all the more reason for Cincinnati to take a cautious approach.
Yeah, I would agree. The only thing that I think you want to do with the Bengals, similar to Tyjae Spears and maybe even Tony Pollard, is if you don't have to start them, don't start them. Just let's see how it plays itself out, because you could see a situation where you're all in on one and the other guy dominates touches. I agree with Dave. We could see a situation where both these guys are playing a lot or playing enough that they matter. Both could score a touchdown. Both could catch a couple passes. Both could clearly get, 10 to 13 carries in this matchup. But if you don't need to play them, just sit them and see how it all unfolds.
All right, we got about 30 seconds left. I'm going to give you 3 receivers and just tell me if any of these guys make you nervous or if you're confident actually starting them this week. Amari Cooper against the Cowboys, George Pickens at the Falcons, Christian Kirk at the Dolphins. Cooper, Pickens, Kirk. Are we starting them?
Pickens is a must-start guy. The other 2 guys are high-end number 3 receivers. Hopefully Kirk is okay. Matchup is great against Miami.
I like Kirk the best of the 3 in full PPR. Cooper next, and Pickens to me is a flex.
All right, we've got fill in the blank from our audience when we come back right here on Fantasy Football Today. So we will finish up with your thoughts. Fill in the blank after this. Back one final time on Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. We've got your fill in the blank tweets from Tom. The best value Bears receiver at their ADP is blank.
Rome Odunze.
Agree.
I'm going to actually say DJ Moore. He's going like 49th now. Isn't he the best if he's 49th?
Ooh, if he's going 49th, then you might have a case.
I'll still take Odunze.
Shh, wrong. This is from Cobra Kai. Like the worst show. Why does anybody like that show? The first rounder most likely to bust is blank.
Adam as the host.
Oh. How about Jamar Chase? Given what's going on with him.
I'll say, yeah, Chase makes sense.
Okay. So what about McCaffrey? How you feeling about that?
I mean, we can make the case for everybody to be a bust.
I did that.
Okay,
you can read it on the site.
Oh.
So give me the top 3. And here are your first round picks: McCaffrey, Hall, Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Bijan Robinson, Saquon Barkley, St. Brown, Jonathan Taylor, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, A.J. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs.
Gibbs, Barkley, McCaffrey.
Chase, Taylor, Barkley.
Okay. Barkley, the only one who's on both of those lists. All right, let's go to our next one. It's from Zach. If Chase sits out, T. Higgins will be a top blank wide receiver.
Like 8?
10, yeah.
Yeah. This is for week 1. I don't know if it's for the entire season. I don't expect Chase to miss the entire season. That would be preposterous. But for week 1 against the Patriots, happy to take T. Higgins, put him up in that top 10 range.
Yeah, he's been really good. He's played 5 games over the last 2 seasons without Jamar Chase. Here are the PPR fantasy points for Higgins. 13.9 at Cleveland last year. That's not an easy matchup. 13 points against the Rams. And then the other 3, at least 23.8 PPR fantasy points for T. Higgins. So he's been pretty much a monster. All right. And okay, Adam will win blank sets in 2025.
0.
I'll take more than 0. You deserve a lot of credit for being a good tennis player. I'll say 1.
Oh, that's out of like 10 sets. Now, you know what? I am going to really train. Tennis is going to become my passion. Forget about it. I'm not going to prepare at all for fantasy football here for my shows. I'm just going to play tennis because this is the only thing that matters now. Winning this one set. And I think Heath thinks he can beat me. So I'll be home for Thanksgiving, Heath, and I'm going to whoop Heath. He's not going to win a game off of me. Good luck in the draft, guys.
You too.
Good luck getting out of your tennis match with Heath now.
Well, I am ready for it. I am looking forward to it. Listen, we've got a great podcast for you, and we've got a lot more on CBS Sports Network Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern throughout the season. But the podcast, the Fantasy Football Today podcast, I think we're going to have 8 episodes per week. We never stop podcasting. Sunday night after the games, Monday with Beyond the Box Score, Tuesday, Waiver Wire, 3, your best targets in trade, Thursday and Friday, start or sit, and yeah, that basically does it. So we'll talk to you on the podcast. It'll be Dave and Jamie on the show tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody. Good luck in your drafts.